Woo, the man of tomorrow is here, and wow, we've got a lot to get into in this episode. This nice little Q&A for all you members of the Zomia ONE Underground. In fact, actually, I just noticed somebody got a new patron on Patreon, of all things. Do keep in mind, I try to concentrate harder on Podbean. In fact, bringing that up, so this is so weird. In fact, let me open up the app here. Oh man, it's kind of perfect because I have some podcasting, like other podcasts and things like this that I want to mention right here in the onset. But anyway, in the podcast app, for the first time in actually probably since I moved everything that is Sovereign Tech / Zomia One over to Podbean, it had an update. And the update had a lot of interesting little features added. One of them is, so, in fact, I was going to try and use this recently, about a month ago, but I didn't end up doing so. But with the Podbean app, if you are a podcaster with Podbean and you're logged into the Podbean app, so if you're like me, if you go to your profile in the app, there's a little red button that allows you to, you would assume, record an episode and then I guess post it right to your feed, right into Podbean. Now, after this update that happened just a couple days ago, and this is, oh boy, it's 9/11. Just a couple days ago, this came out, and it used to just take you to the screen where you could record stuff. Now it brings up a couple of buttons. It brings up record audio and start live cast. And I was like, oh shit. All right. I can start doing live episodes, for patrons, and maybe even live episodes of Sovereign Tech in the near future here. And, but then when you hit it, it says, oh, go to podbean.com/live to, start your live cast. And I do that. And then it just takes you to the sign up sheet again, which I already did back in July. So, well, whatever. We can't do them yet, but there's this thing now. There's a new feature called Golden Beans, and it says about Golden Beans. Golden Beans are the virtual currency on the Podbean app. Users can use Golden Beans to purchase different virtual gifts to send to the host as reward and support during live shows. Golden Beans are also used to purchase admission to live shows. Payment will be charged to your Google Play account at confirmation, blah, blah, blah. Payment is non-refundable, etc., etc. So they've got some kind of currency they're going with here. And basically, well, they offer like 70 beans, gold beans for 99 cents, all the way up to 7,000 golden beans for $100. I have no idea, and there's no blog posts, there's no content about this, but this is the stuff that was put into the Podbean app after the update. Suffice to say that I will still put, the recording of live shows that I do on Patreon. But because I still have over 50 subscribers on Patreon. So, I'm honored. Okay. I'm not complaining one bit. I'm honored that, you want to support me still, there. But, yeah, just something to keep in mind. That looks like Podbean has some very interesting features they're going to shoot for. And, well, I don't know. We'll keep an eye on it. But anyway, of course, for your Wednesday Q&A, we have some. Yeah, am I going to talk about the iPhone 11? Yeah, that'll be on the next Sovereign Tech. Don't worry. We got a loaded Sovereign Tech coming, and it might come a little early. But Christmas in September here, right? But it's so bad. But it's so bad that there's actually good news within it, that it's so bad. And, well, anyway, you'll have to wait for this week's Sovereign Tech to find out what the hell that is. So, okay, anyway, I have, and this is just totally on a lark, going to tell you a little story here. I woke up, and, speaking of the Podbean app, okay, so this is kind of a perfect lead-in. The Podbean app, if you have it set this way, will alert you, and I know a lot of podcast apps will do this, pretty much all of them do, will alert you when a new episode comes out of whatever the fuck you're following on, on Podbean. And actually, I think you can see every podcast that I follow if you look me up on Podbean. But do understand, a great listener, just a great person, shared with me a episode of Joe Rogan that has John Carmack on it, who's kind of a personal hero of mine. And the only reason I'm subscribed to Joe Rogan right now is to listen to that episode. So I'm glad that the listener shared it with me, because otherwise I would have never seen it. Because Joe Rogan. Anyway, so I get this. There's this YouTube channel that I'm somewhat of a fan of. It's called Retroblasting. The guy who runs it, I think his name is Michael. I think it's him and his wife. And, you know, I think he was born like in 78 and I was born in 81. I think. Something like that. So we're fairly close in age. This is one of those guys who I feel like we would be the best of friends, you know, and we'd be absolute brothers and everything. I mean, you know, I really, really feel that. And I really like his work. He did a great video on Buck Rogers, a 2-part video actually on Buck Rogers. He's done videos like on all kinds of stuff. And anyway, they have a podcast, I think, that they call Dreamland. So there's the YouTube show Retroblasting, but then there's the podcast Dreamland. Now, he's a major toy collector. I never really got into toy collecting. I had a little while in the late 90s when Star Wars came out with the Power of the Force collection. I mean, I was a teenager, you know, not that I don't care about age. Collect all the toys you want, okay? I never got into collecting so much of the physical stuff, and I think really that's only because, or the main reason for that, is because I have been for lack of a better way of putting it, I've been a world traveler since I was legally able to get on an airplane alone. I mean, I was before then too, you know, with my family, but, you know, my parents and everything. But I was a world traveler at a very, very young age. I mean, I traveled a lot. I mean, I was basically an illegal in Canada for 3 months. I mean, I was going everywhere. And I credit that with a lot of things, but regardless, because of that, while I have pictures where you can see that I had like a lot of toys, I fell out of that as soon as I started traveling a lot. Like, I mean, now, sure, I have some toys. I have some Funko Pops. I have like a Lego set here from Tron Legacy, but basically it's because it's the only fucking thing you can buy at Tron Legacy. I have my starships. I have some starships. That collection grows a little bit. In fact, I just got a gorgeous USS Franklin that got sent to me. Thank you for that. Anyway, but I don't collect literally everything I own is like on a desk. Okay. It's on like a little computer desk. So I don't collect a lot. That's not my thing. This guy does, but that's just one way that he expresses his fandom for these properties in general. It's pretty clear, like, that he loved the cartoons or movies, say, that these toys from the 70s, 80s, and so on got made for, as much, if not more so, than the toys themselves. So he has really great videos, and they have, on this Retroblasting, or on this Dreamland podcast, they have some dynamite conversations. I mean, just dynamite on there. And I was listening to one that's about, well, it's over a year old, because it's from April of 2018. And this, I put a link in the show notes for it, because I have never listened to something and really, in my opinion, felt so understood. And it's titled The State of Modern Fandom. Okay, and understand this comes from like a science fiction nerd perspective, whatever. We got great questions to get in, folks. In fact, one of them is a really, really deep one that, well, we'll spend time on, and it has to do with recent episodes of Sovereign Tech. Glad that a lot of people like the double dip, the double load, as I often call it, that got released this weekend. I'm glad you all appreciated that. But anyway, it's the state of modern fandom, and I put the link in the show notes. I listened to this because, and I think they miss a lot of things. I think there's things maybe they just either, for whatever reason, they don't want to admit, because their bread and butter is so based in entertainment, you know, and that kind of media, that maybe they can't just come out and say, guess what? I mean, they admit that, like, everything is meant to be a toy commercial, that, you know, they do kind of admit that, but they don't want to go so far as to say that, you know, you realize none of this had to do with putting great art out there. And that's a hard pill to swallow, and it's a hard pill for me to swallow. But I felt so understood when I listened to this, because they talk about how, like, everything today is just shit, you know, and it's clearly made, same things that I've been saying. lately about entertainment is dead and all that. They confirm much of what I'd been saying. And I think we don't realize that, and in fact, this kind of plays up with the Matrix conversation we've had over the past couple Sovereign Techs, or past few Sovereign Techs. And I think one of the reasons I really love, in fact, a great patron, great underground member, sent me, a great listener, sent me a long time one, a video, another video about the Matrix sequels that he thought was really interesting. And that video is done, what's this guy's name? Patrick Williams. I'm a fan of this guy because he loves he loves Batman Forever, which fucking right, baby. Such a great movie. Anyway, he liked the Matrix sequels, even though he admits he feels like there's a ton of flaws in them. I don't even necessarily know if I agree with what he considers flaws, but whatever. It was a great video and I watched it. And at the end of it, he says, you gotta love these films because they weren't trying to please anybody. Like they had, and this is the rub, is that with Matrix Reloaded and Matrix Revolutions, the studios, were like, holy shit, a new franchise did crazy money and everybody's talking about it. That being The Matrix, which came out in 1999. And so Warner Brothers was like, oh, well, here, Wachowskis, make whatever you need to make more. And again, there's debate and a question to make, or there's a conversation to have around whether or not the Wachowskis ever planned on The Matrix being more than just the singular movie. And it does feel like the more you explore the mythology of The Matrix, it does feel like the first movie was meant to be, a one-off, a one and done. And I'm sure I know there's a lot of people who probably wish it stayed that way. But regardless, they were given a opportunity to, wow, we don't understand this movie at all and what you were doing. It looked really cool. That's why we gave you money for it, whatever. We're just, shot in the dark with $80 million. But now that you've proven that you're such a success, here, go ahead and make whatever the fuck you want. Okay, and here's, $300 million, go crazy. And that's part of what makes, and this is the same argument for another Wachowski film, that being Jupiter Ascending, which was like the last major or high budget new franchise attempt done in the past 20 years, probably. Or around there, or at least a decade. And what's so beautiful about these movies is that, this was a case of what happened in the 70s and the 80s, where Star Wars, for $10 million, just out of the blue, became this worldwide phenomenon that the movie studios were like, well, we want to do that again. But they didn't know how it was done in the first place. So they basically said to anybody, Gene Roddenberry with Star Trek, David Lynch with Dune, and it wasn't originally even David Lynch, right? Originally it was Ridley Scott and whoever else. But they went to all these different properties and people and said, and all these science fiction authors, here, we'll turn this into a movie. Just get us shit in space that can make money like Star Wars did. That's what we want. And because of that, the studios were just throwing money at these creators who, fortunately at the time, either the authors were still alive to oversee it to some degree, or they were, people that genuinely believed in art, because the ruse, the curtain hadn't been pulled yet by, to reveal the wizard, that the purpose of all of this is just to line some assholes' coffers in Hollywood, and people that you don't even know their names. And, they thought that it was actually about making like great art and everything. Like Gene Roddenberry, you got to understand, Gene Roddenberry, when he was making the original Star Trek, he was trying to be, the next John Campbell, right? He was trying to create the next great platform for science fiction. And he did that. And, the writers of episodes of the original series were and to this day, some of the top writers science fiction's ever seen. I don't think I never really realized that until recently, that the original series was very much it was the astounding, it was basically Astounding magazine, or Astonishing, whatever, or Amazing, it's like Amazing Stories, all those science fiction pulp magazines. It was that gave us things like Dune and so on. It was basically those put onto TV, and Gene Roddenberry was the cat herder. Okay. But that's the rub, is that these are people who genuinely cared about art and writing great stories and just loved it, and thought that science fiction could actually bring humanity and civilization to a next level. Like they treated science fiction very seriously. And so I think the reason that a lot of shit, like even something like V by Kenneth Johnson and so on, why this stuff was so well done, still holds up, still has a message, still feels like it has meaning and is just so well written and all this shit, is because these people genuinely cared about art, and the studios didn't know how to make populist, as in they didn't know how to make media, they didn't know how to make science fiction that was populist enough and that got everybody's ass in the seat. Okay, and that could do, they just thought, okay, put it in space and it'll make crazy amount of money. Eventually they learned differently, but for a while there, we had a golden era of movies for about 10, 15 years. Maybe 10, we'll say. We had a golden era of movies because of the surprise success of Star Wars, which Star Wars is inherently populist. Just they didn't realize that everything had to follow that same formula. The studio heads didn't. This is my opinion, but I think that it's being shared in this podcast, and that's why I want you to listen to it. And it plays off of major conversations we've had on Q&A, so that's why I'm talking about it here. We had like this 10 years where the studios didn't know better, and you had creators who were getting out great fucking movies that are still watched over and over again to this day, shit by Ridley Scott and so on, that they got away with and were able to make big productions because, again, the studio heads just didn't know, and they just threw money at these people and said, yeah, okay, you're making something in space, here you go do it. And so we have, this amazing little lexicon. But that time is over. Now there is just like in pop music, there's a set formula of what gets people to, move their hips. And now there is a set formula in theaters that gets asses in seats. And in fact, one of the beautiful things that they brought up is something that, and again, I just heard this, okay, but I've said this independently on Sovereign Tech over the past 7 years. Iron Man, the movie Iron Man with Robert Downey Jr. is what changed everything. Now, here's the rub. So they admit, as I have said over and over again, like now everybody's like, oh, Iron Man's the best fucking comic book character. Oh, fuck. Oh, Iron Man. Oh, please. Oh, jerk off. Oh God, I want to come home. They're so nutso over it. Or like, oh yeah, Iron Man is helping train Spider-Man and all. Iron Man and Spider-Man would have never even talked to each other 20 years ago in the comic books. Iron Man was as they verify on this podcast, Iron Man was a second tier character. Nobody gave a shit about him except maybe me. I had an Iron Man tie. I thought Iron Man was so cool because he was basically the Marvel version of Batman to me. And so, I really dug the character, but it was hard for me to, because there was there were a lot of years in my life growing up where because Iron Man was so not popular that he didn't have a comic book. Like he didn't have his own title and you had to read Avengers and, well, there's some characters I can't stand in Avengers. But anyway, I had said in high school, rooting for the underdog here, as I always do. When I was in high school in the 90s, I said, you don't understand. One day, they're going to make an Iron Man movie. And I've told this story many times, but it's because it's fucking true. And I was so right. Like, it's ridiculous how right it was. I said, one day they're going to make an Iron Man movie and it's going to be the biggest fucking thing ever because this character is so flawed compared to just about any other comic book character, especially at the time. He's an alcoholic. He has, all these really adult issues. I said, it's going to put everything right over the top when they do that. And it did. That's exactly what it did. It became this, massive, and it created the entire Marvel cinematic universe. But at the same time, because of that, it also killed, I think it killed a lot of artistic expression, and it killed the ability to create like these really wacky movies because now, everybody's into science fiction. Everybody's into fantasy. Everybody's into comic books. And so I want you to bolster what I am saying, just people who are clearly from completely different walks of life, a little bit older than I, and so on. Okay. I want you to hear from them because it's an independent source of the same shit that I've been saying. And it's not hipster crap, because that's what gets levied, right? Is that, oh no, you're a hipster. No, I'm not a hipster. Okay. Like you can Yeah, I mean, like one of the things with the Matrix movies, I know we got to get into our questions. One of the things with the Matrix movies that a lot of people bring up is that this is a common criticism, and this is the one criticism that I do agree with against the later two films of the trilogy, is that the philosophy is heavy-handed. You get huge monologues. It's like reading Ayn Rand. Okay, you get huge monologues, as to where in the first movie, it was so tightly woven into the script and into the action itself that you didn't notice it. It wasn't heavy-handed. Okay, it wasn't hitting you over the head. And so in that way, the Matrix film is better than the following two. Okay, than the rest of the trilogy. Because that is an objective metric of you can see, anybody can see, we can all see that the script, if you consider, unless you're into the way that Ayn Rand writes, and you like getting heavy-handed and having, 20-page monologues, okay, on philosophy, and if you do, you do. But, as far as like, if not being heavy-handed is considered superior, then there is an objective metric. Okay, even though you can subjectively like the other two movies more. In fact, I've seen reviews, because other people send me videos where that's the case. And that blows my mind. As much as I love those movies, I think they're all great, but wow. Anyway, but that's a subjective metric that you can look at. And that's kind of the thing, is that you can go to these movies from the 70s and 80s, and I think there are absolutely objective metrics. Tightness of script. The comedy isn't so blatant. It's more subdued, more subtle. Lots of these other things where you can say, oh no, that feels more natural. And when something feels more natural, it becomes more believable. That's an objective metric. And I think it can absolutely be said that the movies from back then, there are things that are just clearly objectively better. What allowed for that? Whether it's because the studio heads didn't know any better or what, or because, these people were into classical, because the creators and the writers of these movies were inspired by, more creative works from decades previous that had to be more creative when effects weren't as great, or, whatever. I don't know. In fact, it brings me to another thing. Okay. Like I said, we do have questions we're going to get into. Okay. We're going to get into this. But these are a couple things I want to bring up because they're relevant to a lot of conversations we've been having throughout Zomia One, throughout not just Sovereign Tech, but all kinds of content. Another podcast I was listening to, one that I listen to all the time. Dreamland's kind of a newer thing for me, but one that I've been listening to for as long as I've been listening to podcasts is the Eddie Trunk Show. Eddie Trunk, of course, also kind of a hero of mine. He is a guy who's been in the hard rock and heavy metal radio scene for decades. He's also been in the music industry, and he one of the top DJs. Well, you wouldn't really call, he's a talk show host, but he's also a DJ. But just one of the top guys on the radio in the world. He really, really is a person who's in very high demand. He gets a lot of his podcast. He talks to a lot of classic acts. He'll have guys from Def Leppard or Whitesnake on or whatever, but sometimes he has more modern guys or really guys that have become classic, right? Like, let's be clear here. Okay. Now, two bands that 2019 has been a banner year for music. Just insane, especially if you're a metal fan or a hard rock fan. But we've had an album from Korn and an album from Slipknot this year in 2019. And he's done back to back over the past couple weeks. He did an interview with Korn, with Jonathan Davis, and who's the lead singer, and Head there, Brian, whatever his name is. Head, man, boy, you ever want to hear? So, in fact, I didn't know Head got back into Korn because Head had left because he became a born again Christian after being in Korn. In fact, he had a solo album that's heavy as fuck. It's so great. It's Christian, but it's fucking awesome. If you've never heard his Head solo album, man, that's a stick of dynamite in your ears. It's fantastic. They don't talk about that on the interview at all. I've been in this scene for a long time. So anyway, so you had that, and then he talked to Corey Taylor, of course, of Slipknot. So I was listening to these interviews, and a couple things really came to mind for me. Okay. I'm gonna lay out some factoids quick that come out of these interviews, and then I have a point I want to make. Here's the factoids. Jonathan Davis. Do you want to know who Jonathan Davis's favorite band is? Actually, I'm going to tell you two things about Jonathan Davis. Jonathan Davis does not listen to heavy metal. He never listened to heavy metal. Okay, he's the lyric guy in Korn, and he can write music. Remember, he did the. Actually, I loved what he did with. What was that interview? Not Interview with the Vampire. Queen of the Damned. Okay. He actually did the score for that and wrote like those like special songs for the soundtrack and everything like that. Forsaken that David Draymond sang. I thought that was awesome. I think Jonathan Davis is a very talented guy, but according to him, he never listened to heavy metal. That wasn't his thing. His buddies in Korn had to basically get him into that, and it wasn't until much later on in his life and just before he had started Korn. His favorite band growing up and what he listened to all the time was Duran Duran. That's still his favorite band to this day. Okay, so there's that. He didn't listen to metal. His favorite band's Duran Duran. Okay. Now, let's go to Corey Taylor, Slipknot. Which, by the way, the Korn album and the Slipknot album, for what they are, they're good. I don't know if I'd ever do them for Album of the Week, but whatever. It's hilarious that Slipknot and Korn are like classic rock now because they've been around for 20 fucking years. Okay. Now Corey Taylor is talking with Eddie Trunk on the show, separate interview. And he comes out and he says, so Eddie asks him, like, how are you doing this 20 years later? In fact, this is funny. This is something that comes up in both interviews, the ones with Korn and the one with Corey Taylor of Slipknot. Is that like, did you guys, Eddie asked all of them, did you expect to be here after 20 years? And every single one of them said, no, we didn't think we could keep this up. In fact, we barely can, blah, 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 which is hilarious because when I was a teenager, like we were talking earlier, when I was a teenager in the 90s, getting fucking picked on because I didn't listen to new metal and I was still listening to Judas Priest and Motley Crue and, Deep Purple and go down the list. And being told I was an idiot and stupid and blah, 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 and that music sucks. One of my critiques that I said is like, there's no way these guys are going to be doing this in 20 years. Not keeping up the lifestyle that they're putting on display and everything else. There's just no fucking way that they're going to keep doing this. Well, guess how they're keeping doing this? Corey Taylor says how he does it. He, long ago, gave up drinking, drugs, and he literally works out every day. Oh, he also reads comic books all the time too. But so, and also, like him and Eddie, because Eddie's a really like a classic rock, classic metal guy. They are spending a lot of their time, and a lot of these more modern, what are considered, I guess, more modern acts, like Korn, Godsmack, even like he's had guys on from Godsmack a few times. He even had the guy on from what the fuck's that band? System of a Down. That's it. Anyway, they're always talking about what they're into, what music they love, which is Judas Priest, Deep Purple, Black Sabbath, Motley Crue, Whitesnake, and all this. Like that's what they listened to. That's what inspired them to get into the music that they were into. Now, I don't know if you can tell where I'm going with this. But basically, all the people, for a huge chunk of my life, and there's a point to bring up to this that's actually going to speak to a question that we're going to get to. Maybe we'll just go right into that question after it. But there's a huge chunk of my life where I am consistently being told that, like the classic rock and classic metal that I listen to, and I listed off some of the bands, sucks. Oh, that's for old people. Oh, that's this, blah, blah, blah. But then the people who are telling me that, they're into Korn and Slipknot. But then the actual band members of Korn and Slipknot are into the shit that I'm into. Not only that. Okay? Because believe me, you have no idea how much I've had to deal with the fact and how, never got invited to the cool kid stuff because I don't drink, because I don't do drugs, because, and because like I'm working out all the time. So I'm spending, an hour to 2 hours a day, and maybe I don't have the same amount of time to just lay fucking around and I don't know, be depressed about shit like a lot of these people did. But wait, that's how the guy you're fucking listening to lives. I mean, folks, I know, look, I gotta tell you a little something, okay, about me. Like right now, okay, I mean, there's life changes that I've been going throughout 2019 and kind of changes in how I, need to do things and whatever else, okay? But in just about every way that it matters, I am preposterously happy. I am so happy. I am in a relationship, of course, with Ellen. No secret. Where I did not think that this was possible. I just did not think this was possible. In relationship advice circles, they call this sort of thing, they call it a game changer. Ellen is an absolute game changer. And I cannot begin to tell you how great life is with her. I cannot begin to tell you. The words literally escape me. Okay? Now, that said, I'm also because, look, in life, when you realize as an individual, okay, and maybe that comes through relationships that you have. I also have, I don't talk to him as often as I want to, but or as I'd like to, mainly because I'm so busy and a million other reasons. I hate saying that I'm busy because it sounds so insulting and degrading to the other person. But I have somebody who can finish my sentences, and my brother and best friend, that being Rob, okay, who co-hosts, TIE Fighter Renegades with me. I've met just some of the most beautiful people in my life, through doing, Sovereign Tech and everything. And that's the rub, is that that people can be in your life, other human beings, not for your own pleasure, but just for your own sanity of not feeling alone in the universe, okay? That the kind of people you've always dreamed of having in your life can be in your life. Be it as, best friends, chosen family, chosen family, or lovers. And when you finally have those people in your life, you can't help but be infectiously and just wildly happy. And I am. But then, when that things can be that way, and then when you look at the broader world, and maybe, maybe it is, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Maybe it's because when you do finally have these people in your life, and you finally have really unconditional love in your life, and that is possible. I know there's people who want to say unconditional love is a bullshit concept. No, you're full of shit. Okay, it absolutely is possible. When you have that, and then you realize that talk about bullshit, all the bullshit you had to deal with your whole life, the whole rest of your life, up until this time, and I'm 38. When you realize that, you get mad. You get very, very mad about it and very frustrated that you ever had to deal with it. And you could say you can't experience the sweet without the sour. I understand these kinds of ideas. Okay. You can say that, but it doesn't take away the bitter taste of that sour that you've dealt with for decades. And so in a lot of ways, I am ridiculously happy. And there's a much larger conversation to have around that as well, because I think in a million ways, the entertainment industry, like we were talking about, and a lot of other things, is basically set up to keep us from being happy. Because if we're happy, we have very different ways that we engage with the world. And regardless, okay, I don't want to get sidetracked on that, because we do have a question to get into, at least one. But yeah, I can't help but be positively infuriated at the systems that exist that I know kept me from either A, finding these people in my life, or just keeps other people from coming to similar realizations, and perhaps we can all respect each other and go through life happily, And so now when I think back on all the people that told me that what I was into sucks, and that my way of living is stupid, And that, oh, what do you mean you don't drink? What the hell's wrong with you? And, and all these other things. Like now when I look back as to where now going forward, I have people that are very supportive of my choices. And not only that, but now when you got guys who were supposedly the soundtrack, for all of these people who live the exact opposite lifestyle to me in certain ways, that they're living my way. I mean, it's like you were told you were wrong your whole life, and then suddenly you're told you're right. Now, I'm not saying my way is the only way. I'm not saying there's only one way to live. The human condition is a very dynamic thing. There is not just one way to express your humanity. There are still wrong ways to express humanity, no doubt. Okay? We talk about that all the time on Sovereign Tech. But regardless, I am not wrong. Now, you got to keep in mind, and this will actually play well into the question that I got in, which has to do with the recent episode of Sovereign Tech. I have to remember. Now, okay, children are just beautiful, wonderful, little human beings. And that's what they are. They're human beings, and they deserve to be respected as such. Okay? But unfortunately, we live in a world, again, this will play into our question. Unfortunately, we live in a world where, and this isn't anything new. I mean, I know a lot of my more ANCAP and libertarian audience have probably heard this sort of thing from me, as well as other areas that, and some people that have podcasted longer than I have. Children will can, if it's inflicted upon them, will re-express the traumas of their parents. And it's really sad. And basically, I'm going to say it this way, but I'm please don't misunderstand me. I don't really blame the kids, because I know it's ultimately their parents' fault, or even society's fault in other ways. But kids can be very mean. Teenagers can be very mean. And I'm not blaming them. But that is a pill that a lot of us need to swallow, is that a rational, grown-up human being, it's just not normal for human beings to be mean to each other in those ways. And for one to look at the other and just say, oh, that sucks, oh, that's stupid, oh, that's this, blah, blah, blah. That's not normal. That's not natural. That's not how we like to interact as human beings, because if it was, we would have never gotten anywhere remotely close to here. And we got to keep that in mind, and the problem is that affects us for years, for decades, sometimes for our whole lives. I know there's a lot of activists who are at work under the auspices of, I just can't stand a fucking bully. Well, when's the first time they experienced a bully? It was probably while they were in school. That is still affecting them to this day. And it is a major thrust in their life. And I'm not saying necessarily that it's a bad one. Bullies are shit. They're terrible. Granted, they are probably just re-expressing, the traumas of their parents. But that's a tough reality to sit on, And I think if we can, when you think that when you are reacting to other people's opinions of what you're into or what you are or how you live and all this, it's important to do a gut check and say, did that come from when I was in high school? Did that come from when I was in elementary school? Did it come from when I was a schoolboy? Did it come from when I was young? Did it come from my parents? You got to process it and figure out where that came from. And then if you, and here's what I recommend. If you realize that it came from, say, your time in school, just recognize that children can be so mean. And they don't know why. That's why they can be so mean, is because they really don't know what they're saying or doing. Okay, because they're just re-expressing what their parents obviously did to them or whatever. Got to do that. The world will change when people start doing that in a very real way. Now, that leads in very nicely. I was going to have a conversation about Signal and Telegram here because I did a poll about that. But I'm going to save that for another... We could save that for another time. But, we had the conversation that had to do with the neurobehavioral prediction system that people have proposed to the U.S. government. for finding out, who is, who's mentally ill, supposedly, or so on, and, who is going to potentially go on a killing spree, right? We had that conversation, and in it, the writer of the article, I think it was Gizmodo, was saying, well, they're going to go this far instead of doing something that actually works, like common sense gun laws. And I made it very clear that, of course, I, as an anarchist, no, laws never work. Okay? I mean, they just don't. To paraphrase Mr. Spock, I think it was the episode Day of the Dove in Star Trek. Hate can only stop itself. Otherwise, it's never really stopped. So, making laws that's not going to work. Okay? And let's be very clear here, that there's never one reason, but I'm sure, with a lot of these mass shootings, hate is a major part of it. At the very least, you can read that in their own words. Of course, I don't think these people are conscious of half of what's going on for them and why they're engaging in these things. But regardless of that, and I'm not going to get into any conspiracy theories around it, because ultimately the answer doesn't change regardless of the cause, because it's so widespread. So I had said in that, well, you know what? Here, I'll just read the question that I got in. Person, email me, bbs@sovereigntech.com, if you want to email me as well with anything you've got. If you disagree with me about what I'm about to say, email me. Let's talk about it. Let's have the conversation. In fact, if you really want to talk about it, if you have, you think you've got a great case or something or some kind of explanation, I'll give you the platform. We could do audio together. I'll do a show with you. Get in touch with me if you really want to lay this out. So anyway, let me read the question. Stallion, your doubleheader this weekend was astounding. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really was hoping for a triple with the brimstone you were bringing this weekend, but I digress. In one of the episodes, you might still get that triple. In one of the episodes, you hinted at a multi-generational solution to the terrifying mass shootings that have been all too regular this year. You said we'd have to ask you about it and that it'd be a long conversation. So as a proud member of the underground, thank you, I'm asking, what's the solution? Savzu. Okay, so what I was getting at with when I said that, all right, and I'm not saying this is the only solution, and I have to be very clear in saying that I don't know that it would necessarily work. I can't guarantee anything. Obviously, we don't know the future. But something I had noticed on Twitter in the conversation around this, when I forget which shooting it was. I think it was the one. It doesn't really matter. Anyway, one of the things that a lot of, and people are still bringing up every time one of these comes up, is that they bring up statistics, okay, comparing Europe and America. And they're saying how, there's more shootings here in the US than there are in Europe, blah, blah, blah. They bring up all these statistics. And then they say, so wait, what's the difference? And they say the difference is, the reason why there aren't crazy mass shootings all the time in Europe is because they have quote unquote common sense gun laws. I think I get where they're coming from. I think that's total BS. That's not even remotely true as to why. But I'm gonna lay something out on you. Now, I said earlier in the show that I've been a world traveler really my whole life. In fact, recently, for reasons, had to go to Geneva, and maybe I'll talk about that more in a future episode. But I had to go there, and something I noticed, which I have noticed many times, but it was a little more obvious, okay? Or it was more on my mind, probably because of all the mass shootings that were occurring so recently in the U.S. Okay, I ended up having to stop in Turkey and everything. Anyway, here's the thing, and I mean, this, you could say that this is anecdote, and if you want to write it off that way, fine. But if there's a solution on the table, especially one that doesn't require more guns or laws, and ultimately, ironically, laws are guns at the end of the day, being pointed at you or everyone. I think that those solutions should be at the very least considered, okay? I noticed, even in Turkey, but certainly in much of Europe, okay, how children and their parents are much more touchy. Now, I don't mean in any kind of perverted way. I'm talking about holding hands, hugging, arms around each other, things like this. Okay? Expressions of empathy, care, and love. That's all. That's all I'm saying. Don't get any stupid fucking ideas. Okay? Even though I did see on the TV, I think this is like in the same breath when the Amazon is burning, something to the effect of like there was some pedophilia charge in France. Okay, so I'm not saying pedophilia doesn't occur there, but that's not what this was, and it was very obvious. Okay. And I can speak to my own time growing up. I can speak to what I see in general whenever I'm traveling the U.S., which I have to do often. And it just felt like a very stark contrast to how there is so much empathetic and caring touch that occurs in Europe, in European countries. And it was true in Turkey as well. As compared to the lack of touch, especially younger ages in the United States. I know it seems like a small thing, but it was so prevalent and obvious, and it was so, like, once you're conscious of it, it's like when you buy a new car and suddenly you got a Ford Focus and then suddenly you realize everybody else has a Ford Focus. When you go there and you're traveling, and especially kind of quick, and and you're experiencing so much of the area and everything, you can't help but notice the difference of how people just touch each other a lot more. Now, if you go back years on Sovereign Tech and many other shows that I've done, years, not recently, go as far in the past as you want, I have consistently stated, in fact, I think there's even YouTube videos where I talk about it from years ago. I've consistently stated that the world is suffering from two problems. One is that people don't tell each other how they really feel. The other is a lack of touch. Like I've talked about supporting cuddling and things like this, okay? Even among adults. Not to say those things can't run into problems. Yep, we have people who, where that becomes problems. I understand, okay? But you get my gist. No one's ever really criticized me in the past on this, but then also I don't think I ever necessarily applied it to a more specific problem. And I think that because in America there is this lack of touch, this lack of like real physical contact that gets you not non-consensually, but still forcibly gets you in touch with other human beings. I think because of that, it becomes easy to get into a very dehumanizing or inhuman mode. And yeah, maybe go on a mass killing spree. And the internet's not helping with this either, because now we're not even like now, we don't even have to say things to each other's faces. That could be the third problem, is that we don't have to say things to each other's faces, so we safely say whatever horrible shit is on our mind. And that gets into all kinds of problems as well. But that lack of touch, I've brought it up, in fact, I think there's even documentaries that I'm in that have to do like with liberty stuff or whatever, quote unquote documentaries, where I've said like I've said it on the radio, even when I used to do ads for like the Free State Project, when I was on Free Talk Live and whatever, I would say, one of the things that blew my mind when I came to New Hampshire, when I moved to New Hampshire, that's going to be 8 years ago now, coming in end of October. When I moved to New Hampshire, it was remarkable how nobody shook hands. You hugged. People hugged me. Men hugged me. And that was just the way that everybody greeted each other. We just hugged each other. And I felt like it's amazing how quickly you feel welcomed when you do that instead of the handshake. And it's a beautiful thing. And I think that this lack of touch, again, caring and empathetic touch, as we grow up, Like, my parents didn't hug me that often. They weren't like rubbing my shoulder, whatever. Just wasn't a lot of it. I can, attest to that personally. And I've certainly seen it elsewhere. Okay. Because of that, I feel like there's a very dehumanizing aspect to when we don't have touch. And I think that that's a huge part of it. It's not everything. It's not the only solution. I wouldn't suggest that for a second. But I think that that's a big deal. And the reason why I say I think it would take generations for that to start solving things is that you've got to start telling people, no, we need to get back to where we are touching each other, where we are in each other's personal spaces so that we know that that's another person next to us and not the enemy. And that children need to experience touch. Just like, you have doctors now who say you got to get your hands dirty. Otherwise your immune system doesn't build up right. Well, I think there's something to, we have to get used to touch more, not handshakes. We've got to get used to touch because our mental immune systems start falling apart. Our emotional system falls apart without it. So that was the solution I was talking about. There's so much more. There's never just one solution. There's never not just one reason. There's never just one reason. There's never, you can't pin it all on one thing. But I stand by my statement that I've made in the past that the world, the two biggest problems in the world is that we don't tell each other how we really feel. Okay. And to our faces. I think I need to add in that caveat. It doesn't need to be a 3. It's like we don't tell each other how we really feel to each other's faces. And there's just a lack of touch in every demographic. What a shame. What a shame. Look, something, when you get into, we were talking about, I kind of want to wrap this up. We were talking earlier, about science fiction. People really, you gotta grasp this. There's that great book called Astonishing, and it's all about the golden years of science fiction. This book is infinitely illuminating, especially for me when you're a huge science fiction fan. You have to understand that Asimov, all these classic golden age science fiction writers, they engaged in science fiction. They wrote science fiction. Yeah, they wanted to make money, sure. Like, that's nice. They got to make money doing what they love. But they were entering the philosophical and ideological and political arena of the world with their work. It wasn't just space marines blowing shit up. It had a point. There was a purpose. They were trying to forward the human condition, and they thought they could do it through their stories. They absolutely thought that. Gene Roddenberry did the same thing. He was thinking with television. And fuck, if there were ever a use, or if there was ever a proof of concept that you could do that, well, I've said it all the time. Star Trek's the most subversive goddamn thing that humanity's ever created. I don't think people half the reason that we don't live in a William Gibson dystopia right now is because, fortunately, like, Star Trek readied people for where we are, or at least tried to ready them as much as possible for where we are now. Couldn't prepare them for social media or even other parts of the internet, but how to engage technology and still be a human being. If we didn't have Star Trek, I know you might think that that's a science fiction fan's wet dream or something, but no, really, I don't know where we would be, but it wouldn't be good. You better thank the original series for the rest. As imperfect a show as that is, and it is imperfect, you better, or even the next generation, you better thank that shit forever, whether you like it or not, because without it, I don't want to know what life would be like right now. At least in the Western world. I do not want to know. So, I say that to say that science fiction really can do that. It can forward the human condition. Okay, as much as any, technology that either raises the standard of living and also happens to raise the quality of life. Those are two separate things. Keep that in mind. As much as it can do that, it can. It is a mental tool. Science is right. So science itself is a tool. It's all it is a tool. Okay. And it might not even be our best one, but right now it is the best one we've got. Okay, science is a tool for explaining and understanding the world. Science fiction is as much a tool, it is a method as much as science is. The scientific method, there is also what really should be called the science fiction method. Okay, because it gives you a framework within which to think and hypothesize what does this do in the future. And with the rapid pace of technological, environmental, and other change, okay, in the world, it's the only way we can make sense of it and engage it. We need it. And we need the smart stuff. That's the other part that's really scary, is we don't have the smart stuff anymore. And so now I'm worried that people are just, well, they're going to fall for the ooh and ah. But anyway, where I was getting with a lot of this is that one of the classic ideas and thrusts in Golden Age science fiction, with your guys like A.E. Van Vogt and a lot of others, was Alfred Korzybski's general semantics. Now, I've talked about this in the past. I'm a fan. Another term for it is what's called non-Aristotelian logic. I accept this and integrate this, okay? And Aristotle was an asshole anyway. But the basic idea behind non-Aristotelian logic is that the map is not the territory. Okay, you can describe things. Okay, we can describe things. In Aristotelian logic, basically the idea behind Aristotelian logic is that you can, through language, share with someone the taste of an orange. Okay, just as an example. In non-Aristotelian logic, you can describe the taste of the orange, but you can never truly share what an orange tastes like with someone else, because it's something that goes beyond language. And I think that's part of the importance of non-Aristotelian logic, or of general semantics. I don't really like that term, general semantics, but whatever. You know, I accept that it's out there, and I'll run with it if I need to. Okay, but something we have to start grasping is that there are things beyond that are part of the human condition, that are part of what makes us healthy and give us healthy expressions of being a human being. This rare jewel of a conscious species in the universe that we don't have words for and maybe never can, because the map is not the territory. It's a description of it, but it is only a description. And that's why I say there are two problems with the world. Like, if language could accurately tell other people how you feel, then touch wouldn't be an issue. Okay, like, you wouldn't have to do touch, because then we could just express it via language. And I would argue the internet proves that language is not enough. Because otherwise we probably wouldn't have all the horse shit that's going on, that the internet, I rightly think, does inspire, you know, a lot of terrible things. I mean, a lot of good too, I suppose, but more so it seems to inspire a lot of horribleness. So that's why you need touch. You need that thing that's beyond verbal language. I mean, even mathematics. Yes, mathematics is the language of the universe, but it doesn't really express everything, does it? You know, I mean, it does, but again, it's just a map. It's not the territory. So there you go. There's my solution. We need more touch. We need things that go beyond language, but it seems like everybody just fucking gives a shit about, oh, if he just heard my logical argument, they'd never do that. No, no, I'm sorry. You're wrong. You know, this is something I said. In fact, I think I can remember the episode number. I think it was episode 47 of Sovereign Tech, and we're in episode almost 347. So 300 episodes ago of Sovereign Tech, I had said, you know, if the arguments, if your logical argumentation was enough to change people's minds and to show people the nature of reality and all this, then the whole world would be libertarian. But it's not, because it doesn't solve everything. There's more to the human condition than just what language can describe. And we have to, and not just not describe, it's not, I mean, yes, we do need we got to add in some words into our languages, Okay, I firmly believe that, but then also we have to accept there are things language cannot describe. Okay, the broken divide only takes us so far. So anyway, that said, something that can really expand upon verbal language is music. So why don't we get it? Well, let's wrap that up. There you go. You got my solution. Hope you enjoyed it, or gets you thinking. And I'm open to any conversation you want to have around that. Let's get into our album of the week. And I've got two. I've got a twofer here because one of them got sent in. Talk about great patrons or great listeners. In fact, one of my very first listeners. She sent in I like this a lot. It's by a quote-unquote group, I guess you could say, but it's Master Boot Record, and their album is titled Internet Protocol. And like the song names are FTP, IRC, and all this. I can barely describe it to you. There's chiptunes, synths, some metal. I mean, there's like everything in this. You got to go listen to it. It is a great time, and obviously a perfect fit for Sovereign Tech listeners. You want to check out Master Boot Record, Internet Protocol. I have been playing this pretty much nonstop for a while, though I did have to take a moment to listen to a new album by a band that I'm a bit of a fan of out of Europe, called Crashdiet, which they are like a modern day Motley Crue. And they have a very similar sound. They just came out with a new album called Rust. This is an album, very much a hard rock album. Give it a shot. There's the lead single, I think, from it is a song called Crazy. It's pretty good. The latter half, this is a rare album where the latter half of it is the real winner. In fact, there's a song in there called Reptile, which I think is probably the best one. But the latter half, the album gets a little harder. As in the riffs get harder and whatever. And boy, did I like that. But that's so weird. For me, I'm not used to that. I'm used to like a little bit of a front loading. Like usually your biggest song will be track 3 or something like that, which is kind of the case here. But really, even their lead single, Crazy, I don't think is half as good as the last half of this album. So if you're into that hard rock sound, with some people would call it glam rock and things like this. That's still a big deal in Europe because they have taste. Check out Crashdiet's Rust. Actually, check out Crashdiet's entire discography because they've been at this for about 10 years and they are solid, even though there's been a lot of controversy around that band. A lot of, the American audience doesn't really know anything about them, but they're a huge fucking deal in Europe. Like they're like Manowar big over there, and that's big. They're like Hasselhoff big, and I say that half in jest and half in, absolute respect to David Hasselhoff. So anyway, there you go. There's some stuff I think there's a lot here to walk away with. You have some podcasts that if you want to listen to those, I put links for the Eddie Trunk episodes as well. And I think we got a lot of deep philosophical stuff to consider here as well. And if you think I'm nuts, you know what? Go ahead and email me, because if you're a Sovereign Tech listener, you've heard this and you've been putting your money down for me, believe me, I am going to treat you with the utmost respect. And I really, really want to hear from you on a lot of this. Okay. I got some great responses to recent episodes, to the last couple episodes of Sovereign Tech, where people are adding in their thoughts. I always love getting that. Please do. Please send that stuff in. I want to know when I'm going to read it. Okay. And I'll read it and I'll get your word out, what you got to say to everybody. If I disagree with you, I'll do so respectfully, because again, in a very real way, you're family. Okay. So anyway, that's it for your Wednesday Q&A in the month of September 2019. Of course, we'll have one every Wednesday in September, but that's this one. I will see all of you on the other side.